Billionaire CEO's mom invited his ex-wife to watch him remarry. She arrived with twin boys who looked just like him, and the truth was revealed. The cathedral doors opened. Naomi Wright stepped into the light, amber dress glowing. Two boys flanking her sides. Mirror images of controlled chaos. 200 guests turned. The string quartet stumbled. Someone's champagne glass hit the floor. At the altar, Graham Hartwell froze, his breath catching as the woman he thought he'd never see again walked down the aisle with purpose in every step. Then the boy spoke, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. "Mom said we have your eyes." The second boy stepped forward, pulling out his earbuds. "Both of us. Same jaw. Same dimples. Same hazel eyes that shifted between green and gold." Graham's knees buckled. His bride's bouquet hit the marble. And his mother, the woman who'd orchestrated his perfect life, turned a shade whiter than the wedding dress. Because the twins standing before him wore his face like a mirror he'd never known existed. And today, 7 years of lies were about to shatter in front of everyone. Welcome back to Mr. William Chronicles, where life's greatest lessons unfold through the power of story. If you're new to this family, thank you for joining us. Hit that subscribe button right now. It helps us bring these transformative stories to the world. If you've ever been silenced, erased, or told your truth didn't matter, hit that like button right now and comment below. Because today's story is about a mother who refused to stay hidden, two boys who deserved to know their father, and a man who had to choose between the life he was given and the family he never knew existed. This is the story of how truth always finds its way home. The cathedral doors opened with a whisper, not a bang. That's how Naomi Wright preferred it. Quiet, deliberate, unavoidable. She stood framed in autumn light, her amber dress moving like liquid gold against deep bronze skin. On either side of her, two boys, mirror images of controlled chaos. Miles clutched a worn baseball in one hand, tossing it rhythmically. Mason had earbuds dangling from his collar, eyes scanning the opulent space with the assessment of someone twice his age. The wedding planner's clipboard clattered to marble. A bridesmaid's phone slipped through manicured fingers. The string quartet stumbled over Pachelbel's canon, notes dying like startled birds. 200 guests turned in synchronized horror. Silk rustled. Champagne glasses paused mid-sip. Someone's grandmother clutched her pearls so hard the strand snapped, beads scattering across Italian marble like tiny prayers falling unanswered. At the altar, Graham Hartwell froze mid-breath. His custom Armani suddenly felt like a straitjacket. The air left his lungs in one sharp exhale, and for 3 seconds, 3 eternal, suffocating seconds, the entire cathedral held its breath with him. Beside him, his bride turned. Vanessa Laurent, all porcelain skin and calculated elegance, moved with the slow horror of someone watching their carefully curated life crack down the center. Her bouquet trembled. White roses, imported from Ecuador, began shedding petals like tears. But it was Graham's mother who moved first. Patricia Hartwell rose from the front pew like a queen confronting peasants at the gates. Her Valentino suit was the color of old money. Her pearls caught the light as she pivoted, her expression shifting from shock to fury to something darker. Recognition laced with panic. Because the woman standing there, head high and shoulders back, wasn't just any ex-wife. She was the one Patricia had systematically erased. The one whose calls went unanswered, whose letters never reached their destination, whose existence had been scrubbed from Graham's life with the efficiency of a corporate takeover. Naomi took 3 measured steps down the aisle. Her heels clicked against marble, a steady metronome of reckoning. The boys flanked her like sentries, their matching faces turned toward the altar with unsettling focus. Then Miles spoke, his voice cutting through 200 guests and $10,000 worth of floral arrangements. "Mom said we have your eyes." The words landed like artillery fire. Mason stepped forward, pulling out his earbuds with deliberate slowness. "Both of us." Graham's knees almost buckled. He gripped the altar's edge, knuckles white against polished wood. The resemblance wasn't subtle. It was surgical, devastating. Same angular jaw that photographs loved. Same deep-set hazel eyes that shifted between green and gold depending on the light. Same dimple on the left side when they almost smiled, which they weren't doing now. Same widow's peak. Same slight cleft in the chin that Graham had inherited from his father and hated until he was 30. They were Graham's face, split and replicated, standing in shoes he'd never helped tie. Miles was taller by an inch, broader in the shoulders, with an athlete's ease in his stance. He wore a navy blazer that looked borrowed, the sleeves slightly too short, revealing wrists that promised he'd be 6 feet before high school ended. Mason was leaner, quieter, watching everything with the analytical precision of someone who missed nothing. His glasses were taped at the corner, a detail that gutted Graham for reasons he couldn't immediately name. Vanessa's bouquet hit the floor with a muted thud. Petals scattered. Her veil slipped sideways, revealing perfect makeup beginning to run. Graham. Her voice cracked on his name. What is this? He couldn't answer. His mouth opened, closed. No sound emerged except a strangled breath that might have been a prayer or a curse. He wasn't sure which. Patricia moved then, heels clicking like gunshots as she descended from her throne in the front row. Her face had gone rigid, every muscle controlled, every emotion locked behind decades of practiced composure. This is wildly inappropriate, Patricia hissed, her voice dripping with the kind of authority that had closed boardroom deals and destroyed careers. She turned to the crowd with a smile that never touched her eyes. We'll handle this privately. But Naomi didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even lower her chin. She stood rooted, flawless, firm, and still. You invited me, Naomi said, her voice calm but final, carrying to every corner of the cathedral. I didn't crash anything. Patricia's breath caught, almost invisible, but Naomi saw it. The slight flare in the nostrils, the twitch in the temple, the micro-expression of control beginning to crack. Gasps scattered across the front row like dominoes falling. Patricia turned toward Graham, her face desperately working to hide the panic crawling behind her irises. She's lying, Patricia said through a tight smile. This is clearly a setup. Naomi reached into her clutch, slow, deliberate, theatrical. She pulled out a cream envelope, Patricia's monogram embossed in silver on the front. The return address was visible even from the third row. Funny thing about certified mail, Naomi continued, holding it up for everyone to see. It requires a signature. She turned the envelope, revealing Patricia's distinctive cursive scrawled across the receipt. Yours specifically. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward. It was surgical. It cut through the orchestra music, through the smell of fresh orchids, through every carefully staged column and gold-trimmed champagne flute in the room. Graham's hand dropped from his mother's grip. He stared at the envelope like it might explode. What is this? His voice came out hoarse, unfamiliar. Insurance, Naomi replied, her eyes never leaving his. Against being erased twice. Miles bounced his baseball once, a single, resonant thump that echoed through the cathedral. Mason adjusted his glasses, his gaze sweeping across the guests like he was cataloging faces for future reference. Patricia's mouth opened, but before she could speak, Naomi took another step forward. Meet your sons, Graham. Her voice softened, but the strength behind it could have moved mountains. They've been waiting 7 years to say hello. The photographer lowered his camera, just staring. The violinist lost her bow mid-stroke. Even the priest, who'd seen his share of dramatic wedding moments, looked like he was reconsidering his calling. Graham's eyes met Naomi's across 20 feet of imported carpet and shattered dreams. And in that moment, time folded. If you've ever had to speak a truth that others tried to bury, if you've ever walked into a room knowing you weren't wanted, but showed up anyway because your truth deserved to be heard, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling us what you'd do in Naomi's shoes. And subscribe because this story is just getting started. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. 7 years earlier, the Austin courthouse smelled like old paper and broken air conditioning. Naomi stood in a hallway that had seen 1,000 rushed weddings, wearing a cream dress she'd bought on clearance, and holding a bouquet of grocery store daisies that were already wilting. Graham arrived 10 minutes late, tie crooked, hair disheveled from running his hands through it too many times. He was nervous. They both were. "You sure about this?" he asked, taking her hand. "Are you?" she countered. He kissed her instead of answering. It tasted like coffee and promises neither of them knew how to keep yet. They signed papers in front of a judge who looked bored and a witness they'd pulled from the waiting room. No family, no friends. Just two people who loved each other enough to believe that would be sufficient. It wasn't. Patricia found out exactly 14 days later. Naomi would never forget the moment. She and Graham were having breakfast in his apartment. Her apartment now, technically, though she'd barely moved in 3 boxes. Pancakes on mismatched plates. Orange juice in champagne flutes because Graham thought it was romantic. Then his phone rang. She watched his face change as his mother spoke. Watched the color drain. Watched his jaw tighten and his free hand curl into a fist against the counter. "Mom, we can explain," he started. Whatever Patricia said next made him go silent for 43 seconds. Naomi counted. When he finally spoke again, his voice had changed. Smaller. Younger. "Yes, ma'am. I understand. Tonight." "Yes." He hung up. Wouldn't meet Naomi's eyes. "She wants to meet you," he said. "Dinner. Just the 3 of us." The dinner never happened. Instead, Patricia showed up at Naomi's job, a small marketing firm where Naomi worked as a junior copywriter. She arrived in a black town car, wearing Chanel, and carrying the kind of authority that made security guards step aside without question. "Ms. Wright," Patricia said, settling into the chair across from Naomi's desk like she owned it. "We need to discuss my son's future." "You mean our future," Naomi corrected. Patricia smiled. It was the kind of smile sharks wore before they struck. "No, dear. I mean his future. The one you're currently jeopardizing." She slid a check across the desk. 6 figures. More money than Naomi had seen in her entire life. "Walk away. Quietly. Sign the annulment papers my lawyers will send. And this is yours." Naomi slid the check back. "I love him." Love. Patricia said the word like it was something distasteful she'd found on her shoe. How quaint. "Love doesn't build empires, Ms. Wright. It doesn't secure legacies. And it certainly doesn't mix well with—" She paused, her eyes traveling over Naomi's features with clinical assessment. "Complications." The meaning was clear. Naomi's brown skin, her modest background, her Southside Houston apartment. Her existence was the complication. "Get out," Naomi said quietly. Patricia stood, smoothing her skirt. "You'll regret this." She didn't make threats. She made prophecies. Within 3 days, Naomi's joint bank account with Graham was frozen. His phone number changed. The apartment building suddenly had new security protocols, ones that didn't recognize her key card. She tried calling his office. His assistant said he was unavailable. Always unavailable. She tried showing up at Hartwell Industries. Security escorted her out. She sent letters. They came back marked "Return to Sender." She sent emails. They bounced. It was like Graham Hartwell had been erased from her life with the efficiency of a surgical strike. Except he hadn't been erased. He'd been reprogrammed. 3 weeks after Patricia's visit, Naomi discovered she was pregnant. She called Graham's mother because she had no other choice. Patricia answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting. "I'm pregnant," Naomi said. "How unfortunate," Patricia replied. "I'll have my lawyers send abortion clinic recommendations." The line went dead. Naomi stood in her tiny bathroom, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the sink. She was 26 years old, alone, and carrying twins she didn't know about yet. She tried reaching Graham one more time. Left a voicemail that she practiced 17 times before recording. "Graham, it's me. I don't know what your mother told you, but I'm still here. I'm pregnant. Please. Just call me back. Please." He never did. What Naomi didn't know, what she wouldn't learn until that cathedral 7 years later, was that Graham never received the message. Patricia had already installed monitoring software on his phone, rerouted his emails, and positioned herself as the gatekeeper between her son and the world. Graham believed the story Patricia fed him, that Naomi had taken a settlement and left, that she'd been a gold digger all along, that she'd never really loved him. He mourned her. Then he moved on, because that's what Patricia taught him to do. Compartmentalize, move forward, never look back. Meanwhile, Naomi's water broke on a Tuesday during a thunderstorm that battered Houston like an angry god. Her mother drove her to the hospital, gripping the wheel with white knuckles, while Naomi breathed through contractions that felt like her body was being torn in half. No epidural, insurance complications that would take 3 hours to sort out, and the babies wouldn't wait. No husband, no father, just pain and prayers whispered between gasps. Miles came first at 11:47 p.m., screaming his arrival with the fury of someone who'd already decided the world owed him answers. Mason followed at 11:50 p.m., quieter, watchful even then, his eyes tracking the nurse's movements like he was cataloging data. When they placed both boys on her chest, Naomi cried for what she'd gained and what was missing in equal measure. The nurse held out the birth certificate paperwork. Father's name. Naomi's pen hovered over the blank line. She thought of Graham's face the last time she'd seen him, confused, distant, already half gone. She thought of Patricia's words, walk away. Quietly. She left the line empty. For 2 years, Naomi tried. Every single month, she sent updates. Photos of the twins sleeping, the twins crawling, the twins taking their first steps. She sent birthday invitations. School enrollment forms with spaces for father's signature left blank. Every letter came back. Some opened, some not. But always returned. She showed up at Hartwell Industries 6 times. Security had her photo. They stopped her at the lobby before she reached the elevators. She called from different numbers. Graham's assistant became expert at deflection. Mr. Hartwell is in meetings all day. Would you like to leave a message? She left 43 messages. He returned 0 calls. Eventually, Naomi stopped trying to reach Graham. But she never stopped talking about him to the boys. Your father's busy, she'd say when Miles asked why other kids had dads at their baseball games. He's important. He's building companies, changing the world. Does he know about us? Mason asked once, his 7-year-old face serious behind glasses he'd just gotten. Naomi hesitated. Then, I don't know, baby. But if he did, I think he'd want to be here. She chose to believe that. Had to believe it. Because the alternative, that Graham knew and didn't care, would have destroyed something in her she couldn't afford to lose. So she built a life. Started her own coaching business. Bought a small house. Raised 2 boys who looked exactly like the man who'd vanished from her life. And every time someone asked about their father, she said the same thing. He's not here, but that doesn't mean he's a bad person. Sometimes life gets complicated. Miles and Mason grew up believing their father was a good man who was just too busy to visit. They had no idea they'd been erased. If you believe the truth always finds its way to the light, no matter how deeply it's buried, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like if you've ever had to be strong for someone else when you were breaking inside, and comment below telling us, would you have kept trying to reach Graham, or would you have given up sooner? Your answer might surprise you. Graham's legs moved without permission, carrying him down 3 altar steps before his mother's hand shot out, gripping his forearm with manicured nails that dug in like talons. Don't, Patricia hissed, her voice low and venomous. Not here. Think about what this looks like. Graham pulled free. For the first time in 34 years, he pulled free. He walked toward Naomi, past rows of guests holding up phones like this was entertainment, past his groomsmen frozen in matching tuxedos, past everything his mother had carefully constructed. He stopped 3 feet from the boys, knelt slowly, his knees cracking against marble. Do you know who I am? His voice came out broken, barely audible over the rustling silk and whispered speculation. You're the guy who wasn't there, Miles said. No accusation, just observation, delivered with the brutal honesty only children possess. Mason tilted his head, adjusting glasses that were held together with tape at the corner. Mom said you were important, busy, that maybe someday you'd show up. The words hit like buckshot, small, scattered, devastating. Graham looked at Naomi. "Tell me everything." She pulled out her phone, fingers swiping with practiced efficiency. Turned the screen toward him. A folder labeled Return TO Sender contained 63 items. 63 attempts to reach him. His hands shook as he scrolled. Ultrasound images dated 7 years ago. Newborn photos, 2 tiny faces, eyes closed, swaddled in hospital blankets. First birthday with smash cakes and matching party hats. Miles holding up a crayon drawing. "This is my dad. He's busy saving the world." Mason's kindergarten graduation, wearing a suit jacket 3 sizes too big, beaming at the camera. Every photo had a letter attached. Scanned. Documented. Each one marked with a return date. Some had been opened. He could see the broken seals. Others came back untouched, refused at the source. "I sent these to your office," Naomi said quietly. "Your apartment. Your mother's estate. I used certified mail, regular mail, courier services. I tried email before you blocked my address. I called from different numbers until your assistant recognized my voice." Graham couldn't breathe. "I never saw these." "I know." Her voice held no triumph, only exhausted truth. "But not knowing doesn't make them less real. Doesn't make the nights I spent alone any shorter. Doesn't make their questions about you any easier to answer." Behind him, Vanessa spoke, her voice trembling. "You have children?" Patricia moved forward, damage control mode fully activated. "This is a misunderstanding." "No." Graham's voice cut through his mother's for the first time in his adult life. He stood, still holding Naomi's phone, and turned to face Patricia. "What did you do?" "I protected you," Patricia said, her chin lifting with righteous conviction. "From a mistake that would have derailed everything we built." "They're not a mistake." His voice was steel wrapped in heartbreak. "They're my sons." He looked at the twins again, really looked. Saw himself in every feature. The way Miles stood with weight shifted to his left foot, exactly like Graham did. The way Mason pushed his glasses up with his middle finger, a gesture Graham had done since college. 7 years of Little League games. 7 years of bedtime stories. 7 years of scraped knees and loose teeth and first days of school. Gone. Erased. "You said she took money and left," Graham whispered, turning back to his mother. Patricia's expression flickered. "I said what was necessary." "You lied." "I made a choice," Patricia corrected. "You were building an empire. You didn't need the distraction of my family." His voice rose, echoing off cathedral ceilings. "Of my children?" Naomi reached into her bag again, pulled out something else. A binder. Worn at the edges, pages dog-eared from constant reference. She held it out to Graham. "This is what you missed." He took it with trembling hands. Opened it. Doctor's visits with handwritten notes. Miles has peanut allergy. Mason gets car sick on highways. School sign-in sheets showing Naomi's signature. Always alone, always present. Favorite foods. Miles loves strawberries. Mason will only eat grilled cheese cut diagonally. Report cards. Perfect attendance. Honor roll. Soccer team photos. Chess club certificates. A section labeled questions they asked. Why doesn't our dad live with us? Does he know our names? Did we do something wrong? And Naomi's responses, documented in her careful handwriting. Your father loves you. He's just very far away. No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Graham's throat closed. Tears blurred the pages. The last page held a note in Naomi's handwriting, dated 1 week ago. They don't hate you. I never let them. I told them you were brilliant and kind, and that if you knew about them, you'd move heaven and earth to be there. I chose to believe that. Had to believe it. Because the alternative would have poisoned them, with anger they didn't deserve to carry. But forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. You can't fix 7 years with apologies. You can only decide what to do with the years ahead. If you want to know them, truly know them, it starts with showing up. Not with money or gifts or grand gestures. Just presence. Just truth. Just you. Graham clutched the binder to his chest like it might disintegrate. His shoulders shook. Vanessa appeared at his side. She looked between Graham and Naomi, at the boys standing like sentinels, at Patricia's frozen rage. Then she did something nobody expected. She removed her veil slowly, carefully, like unwrapping a gift she was returning. Handed it to her maid of honor. "Thank you," Vanessa said, looking at Naomi. Naomi blinked. "For what?" "For showing me the exit before I walked into the cage." She turned to Graham, her voice gentle but final. "I hope you find what you're looking for, but you won't find it with me." She walked past him, past Patricia, past 200 guests. Her heels whispered against marble, steady, certain, free. The doors closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like closure. Graham stood in the wreckage of his almost wedding, holding a binder of lost years, while his mother's world crumbled and his sons watched with identical hazel eyes. Naomi touched Miles's shoulder, then Mason's. "Time to go." "Wait," Graham said. "Please. Can I?" "Not today," Naomi replied. "Today you process. Tomorrow, if you're serious, you show up." She wrote an address on the back of the envelope. Her home. 7 a.m., she said. "If you mean it." Then she walked out the way she came. Not rushed. Not angry. Just done. The boys followed, and Graham stood watching his entire life walk away for the second time. This time, he knew exactly what he was losing. Graham showed up at 6:47 a.m. He'd been sitting in his car since 6:15, watching the small house through the windshield. Modest. Clean. A basketball hoop over the garage. Flowers in window boxes that someone actually watered. The kind of home that felt lived in rather than decorated. Nothing like the sterile penthouse he'd woken up in alone. He had coffee, 3 cups, because he wasn't sure what people drank, and a bag of donuts from the place that had a line around the block. His hands shook as he knocked. Naomi opened the door in a robe and head wrap, eyebrow raised. "You're early." "Didn't want to miss another day," he said. She studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. "They're eating breakfast." The kitchen was small but warm. Morning light streamed through curtains that didn't match, but somehow worked. The twins sat at a table meant for 4, hunched over bowls of cereal. Miles looked up briefly, looked back down, kept eating. Mason didn't even turn around. "Boys," Naomi prompted gently. "Your father's here." "We see him," Miles said, voice flat as pavement. Graham set the coffee and donuts on the counter. "I brought." "We already ate," Mason interrupted, still not looking up. The rejection was surgical, polite, devastating. Graham sat anyway, in the empty chair across from them. "Can I just sit here while you finish?" Miles shrugged. Mason said nothing. So Graham sat in silence, watching his sons eat cereal, and felt like he was intruding on a life that had learned to function without him. That's how it went for weeks. Graham showed up every morning, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with bagels, once with fancy pastries that went uneaten because the boys preferred Pop-Tarts. He drove them to school when Naomi allowed it, the car rides filled with awkward silence, broken only by the twins' conversation with each other, never with him. He attended Tuesday dinners, helped with dishes, sat on the couch while the boys did homework at the table, acting like he wasn't there. They were polite, always polite, but polite was a wall, and Graham couldn't find the door. "Give him time," Naomi said one evening after the boys went to bed. "You're still a stranger who happens to share their DNA." "How much time?" he asked. "However long it takes," she replied. "You don't get to rush this, Graham. They didn't ask to meet you on a schedule." So he stopped trying to force connection and started trying to earn it. He showed up to Miles's baseball games, sat in the bleachers with the other parents, wearing jeans and a team cap he'd bought from the concession stand, learned the difference between a changeup and a curveball, memorized batting averages and RBI stats like they were quarterly earnings reports. The first 3 games, Miles pretended not to notice him. The 4th game, Miles hit a double. Graham clapped. Miles glanced at the stands, just for a second, then ran to second base. The 7th game, Miles came up to bat with bases loaded. 2 outs. Bottom of the 6th. His team down by 2. Graham leaned forward, hands gripping his knees. The pitcher wound up. Released. Miles swung. The crack of the bat echoed across the field like a gunshot. The ball sailed over the left field fence, disappearing into the parking lot beyond. Grand slam. Graham was on his feet before he realized he'd moved, screaming at the top of his lungs. "That's my boy. That's my son. Did you see that? That's my son." Other parents turned to stare. Graham didn't care. He was jumping, fist-pumping, making a complete fool of himself while Miles rounded the bases. When Miles crossed home plate, his teammates mobbing him with high fives and helmet slaps, he looked up at the stands. Found Graham. And for the first time since the cathedral, Miles smiled. Not a full smile. Not forgiveness. But acknowledgement. Recognition. It was enough. Mason was harder. He didn't do sports or loud celebrations. He did chess tournaments in quiet libraries and coding clubs where 12-year-olds argued about Python syntax. He lived in his head, observing, calculating, keeping score in ways Graham didn't understand yet. Graham bought books on chess strategy, watched YouTube tutorials on openings and endgames, downloaded coding apps, and worked through beginner exercises until his eyes crossed. He challenged Mason to a match on a Saturday afternoon. Mason set up the board with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "You know how to play?" "I used to," Graham said. "In college." "That was a long time ago," Mason observed. It was a massacre. Mason checkmated him in 11 moves. Graham didn't even see it coming until it was over. "Another game?" Graham asked. Mason shrugged. "If you want." They played 16 more games over the next 3 weeks. Graham lost every single one. On the 17th game, Graham saw it. The trap Mason was laying, 3 moves ahead. He countered, forcing Mason to abandon his strategy and actually think. The game lasted 43 minutes. Graham still lost, but this time he made Mason work for it. Mason reset the board, expression thoughtful. "You actually studied." "You're worth studying for," Graham replied. Something shifted in Mason's eyes. Not warmth, not yet, but respect. The smallest opening in the wall. "Want to see my code?" Mason asked quietly. Graham's throat tightened. "I'd love to." Mason pulled out his laptop, showing Graham a game he was building. A simple platformer with a character that jumped and collected coins. He explained the logic, the bugs he couldn't fix, the features he wanted to add. Graham listened, really listened, asked questions that weren't stupid, suggested solutions that sometimes worked. By the end of the afternoon, they'd fixed 2 bugs together. Mason's game ran smoother. And when Mason closed his laptop, he said something that changed everything. "Thanks, Graham." Not Dad. Not yet. But not silence either. Progress came in small moments after that. Miles started texting him memes. Stupid ones about baseball players and internet trends Graham didn't understand, but laughed at anyway. Mason asked him to debug code on a Tuesday evening. His voice casual, but the gesture monumental. Graham brought his old vinyl collection over one Sunday. The boys had never seen records before. They spent 3 hours listening to albums from the 70s and 80s, arguing about which decade had better music. 80s had better drums, Miles insisted. 70s had better guitar solos, Mason countered. 90s had better everything, Graham added, just to watch them team up against him. They did, passionately, and it was perfect. He learned to braid hair, badly. Miles sat patiently while Graham fumbled through YouTube tutorials, creating lopsided cornrows that looked like they'd been done in the dark by someone with no fingers. "You tried," Miles said, examining the disaster in a hand mirror. "That counts for something." Graham helped with science projects. Mason's volcano erupted with so much vinegar it stained the kitchen counter. Miles' solar system model had planets the wrong size and in the wrong order, but Graham helped him fix it at midnight before it was due. He showed up to parent-teacher conferences, sat beside Naomi, taking notes like his life depended on it, asked questions about curriculum and learning styles, requested progress reports. The teachers assumed he'd always been present. Graham didn't correct them, just tried to catch up on 7 years in 7 minutes. 3 months after the cathedral, something shifted. They were watching a movie, some superhero thing with too many explosions, and Miles, half asleep on the couch, leaned against Graham's shoulder without thinking. Graham froze, terrified to move and break the spell. Miles stayed there, didn't pull away, just fell asleep with his head on Graham's shoulder while Mason argued with Naomi about plot holes. That night, after the boys went to bed, Naomi found Graham standing in the hallway, staring at nothing. "You okay?" she asked. "He fell asleep on me," Graham whispered. "Miles. He just leaned over and fell asleep." Naomi's expression softened. "That means he feels safe." Graham's eyes watered. "I don't deserve that yet." "Maybe not," Naomi agreed. "But you're earning it. One day at a time." For months in, Miles called him Dad for the first time. They were leaving a baseball game. Miles's team had won, and Miles was riding the high of a victory. "Dad, did you see that catch I made in the 5th inning?" Graham stopped walking. "What did you just call me?" Miles froze, realizing what he'd said. His face flushed. Graham. Sorry. Don't apologize," Graham said, voice thick. "Say it again." Miles looked at Mason, who nodded once. "Dad," Miles repeated, quieter this time. "Did you see the catch?" Graham pulled him into a hug. Miles hugged back. And just like that, after 17 weeks of showing up, of losing chess games and braiding hair badly and memorizing baseball stats, Graham wasn't a stranger anymore. He was becoming their father. Comment below if you believe it's never too late to show up for the people who matter. Hit that like button if you've ever had to earn someone's trust after losing it. And subscribe because this family's journey is far from over, and what happens next will test everything they built. Patricia Hartwell didn't do defeat. She did strategy, repositioning, long game warfare disguised as maternal concern. She waited exactly 4 months before making her move. Naomi was in a client meeting when the receptionist buzzed. "There's a Patricia Hartwell here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." Naomi's stomach dropped. "Send her in." Patricia entered like she owned the building, wearing Chanel and carrying entitlement like a designer handbag. She settled into the chair across from Naomi's desk without being invited. "Ms. Wright," Patricia began, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "We need to talk about this situation you've created." "I didn't create anything," Naomi replied calmly. "I just stopped hiding." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You think you've won? That showing up with those boys and embarrassing my family publicly somehow gives you leverage." "I don't want leverage. I want my sons to know their father." "Their father," Patricia repeated, venom dripping from each syllable. "Let's be clear about what you want. You want access to the Hartwell fortune. You want your children." "Our children," Naomi corrected, "positioned as heirs. You want to trap my son with obligation and guilt." Patricia leaned forward. "I've seen women like you before, opportunists who use children as—" "Get out." Naomi's voice was quiet but absolute. "Now." Patricia stood, smoothing her skirt. "You'll regret this conversation. I promise you that." She kept her promise with brutal efficiency. The first attack came through Graham's accounts. The education funds he'd established for the twins, frozen pending verification of paternity and legal guardianship review. Never mind that DNA tests had already confirmed what everyone could see. Then the lawyers arrived. Certified letters demanding custody evaluations, home inspections, financial disclosures. Threats wrapped in legal language about establishing appropriate parental frameworks and protecting the children's best interests. The subtext was clear: prove you're worthy, or we'll take them. Naomi called Graham at midnight. He answered on the first ring. "What's wrong?" "Your mother sent lawyers. They want to audit my finances, inspect my home, interview the boys' teachers." Her voice cracked. "Graham, they're trying to build a case that I'm unfit. I'm coming over. It's midnight. I'm already in the car." He arrived 23 minutes later, still in pajama pants and a wrinkled t-shirt. Naomi opened the door, and he saw the fear she'd been holding back. "She's not taking them," Graham said. "I won't let her." The second attack came at the boys' school. Patricia showed up during lunch, claiming grandmother's rights, asking to take Miles and Mason for an impromptu visit. The school called Naomi. By the time she arrived, Patricia was in the principal's office, charm deployed at maximum capacity. "I simply want to spend time with my grandsons," Patricia was saying. "Surely that's not unreasonable." Graham walked in before Naomi could respond. He'd been in a board meeting across town, but had dropped everything. "You're not on their approved pickup list," Graham said flatly. "And you won't be." Patricia turned, surprise flickering across her face before she masked it. "Graham, don't be dramatic. I'm their grandmother. You're the woman who tried to erase them for 7 years." His voice was steel wrapped in ice. "Security will escort you out. If you come back, I'll file a restraining order." The principal looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Hartwell, perhaps we should." "There's nothing to discuss," Graham interrupted. "My mother is not authorized to contact, visit, or communicate with my children in any capacity. That's effective immediately." Patricia's mask finally cracked. "I'm trying to protect you from a mistake." "They're not a mistake." Graham's voice echoed through the office. "They're my sons. And you cost me 7 years with them. You lied. You manipulated. You destroyed letters and blocked calls, and fed me poison disguised as protection." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something more dangerous than shouting. "You're done. Done controlling my life. Done making decisions for me. Done treating people like chess pieces you can sacrifice for your version of legacy." Patricia's face went white beneath her makeup. "You don't mean that." "I've never meant anything more." He pulled out his phone, showed her the screen. "I've already moved all my accounts to banks you don't have access to. Changed my passwords. Hired my own lawyers. You want to fight for custody? Try it. But know that every lie you told, every letter you returned, every call you blocked, I have documentation for all of it. I'm your mother," Patricia whispered, playing her final card. "And they're my sons." Graham's voice didn't waver. "You taught me that blood matters. That family is everything. That legacy is built on the people we protect." He paused. "You were right. So choose which relationship you want to salvage, because you can't have both." The silence stretched like broken glass. Patricia gathered her purse with trembling hands. "You'll come back to me. When this infatuation fades and reality sets in, you'll remember who actually built everything you have." "I already remember," Graham said quietly. "And I'm choosing differently." She left without another word, heels clicking down the hallway like a retreat drumbeat. After she was gone, Graham collapsed into a chair. Naomi sat beside him. "She'll try again," Naomi said. "I know, but she won't win." He looked at her, exhausted but certain. "I should have done this 7 years ago. Should have questioned. Should have fought. Should have chosen you over her comfort." "You're choosing now," Naomi replied. "That's what matters." The final attack came 3 days later. Anonymous calls to Child Protective Services claiming neglect, unsafe living conditions, inappropriate parenting. The caseworker who showed up looked apologetic. "I'm sorry. We have to investigate every report." "I understand," Naomi said, opening the door wide. "See whatever you need to see." Graham was there within the hour. They walked the caseworker through the house together. Clean rooms. Full refrigerator. Happy children doing homework at the kitchen table. The case was closed within 24 hours. Unfounded. Malicious reporting. Graham made one final call to his mother. "If you ever come near them again, if you ever try to hurt Naomi or manipulate my sons, I'll make sure every business partner, every society friend, every person in your orbit knows exactly what you did. The letters. The lies. All of it." Patricia said nothing. "We're done," Graham said. "Completely." He hung up. Patricia Hartwell didn't try again. Not because she'd changed, but because she'd finally encountered something she couldn't control. A son who'd learned to choose love over legacy. And a woman who'd taught 2 boys that showing up was more powerful than any amount of money or influence. 6 months passed like a gentle exhale. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where nothing spectacular happened, but everything felt right. Mason was at the kitchen table, pencil scratching across homework while he muttered about geometry proofs. Miles was in the backyard, practicing his swing against the fence, each hit punctuating the quiet with a satisfying thwack. Graham stood at the stove, attempting Naomi's spaghetti recipe and failing spectacularly. The sauce was too thin. The pasta was slightly overcooked. But he was trying, and that counted for something. Naomi folded laundry on the couch, her movements automatic, meditative. She glanced up occasionally, watching Graham burn garlic, listening to Miles's back connect with phantom baseballs, hearing Mason's frustrated sighs over equations. This was home now. Imperfect. Real. Theirs. Graham turned off the burner, wiped his hands on a towel, and walked into the living room. He didn't plan it, didn't rehearse, just opened his mouth and let the truth out. Naomi. She looked up, a pair of Miles's socks in her hands. Marry me. The socks dropped. What? Marry me. Again. For real this time. His voice was steady, certain, stripped of everything except truth. Not because of obligation or fixing the past. Because I want to wake up here every morning. Because I want to burn dinner and argue about whose turn it is to take out the trash. Because I love you. Because I never stopped. From a hallway, chaos erupted. Two bodies crashed through the doorway like a comedy sketch gone wrong. Miles and Mason tumbled into the living room, elbows knocking, voices overlapping. Say yes. Miles shouted, bouncing on his toes like he was about to steal second base. MOM, please. Mason added, his glasses crooked from their hallway sprint. Naomi's hand flew to her mouth, caught between laughter and tears. You were eavesdropping? Say yes, they chanted in unison, a chorus of hope and mischief. She looked at Graham. Really looked. Saw the man who'd shown up at 7 a.m. with coffee and donuts. Who'd lost 17 chess games before winning one. Who'd scream, "That's my boy," so loud at a baseball game that other parents complained. Who'd stood between his mother and his family without hesitation. Not the man who'd left. The man who'd stayed. Yes, she whispered. The boys erupted. Miles tackled Graham, so hard they both nearly went down. Mason joined the pile, laughing in a way he rarely did, unguarded, young, happy. Naomi stood, pulled into the chaos by four arms that refused to let her stay separate. They planned the wedding in 3 weeks. No cathedral. No designer gown. No guest list that required a spreadsheet. Just 20 people in Naomi's backyard on a Saturday afternoon when the weather cooperated and the string lights Graham hung actually worked. Naomi wore a simple white dress from a boutique downtown. No train. No veil. Just her radiant real. Graham wore shirt sleeves and suspenders the twins had picked out. Navy blue with tiny baseballs embroidered along the straps. Miles and Mason stood as joint best men, flanking Graham at the makeshift altar Miles had built from scrap wood and Mason had decorated with wildflowers they'd picked that morning. The officiant was Naomi's college roommate. The music was a Bluetooth speaker playing a playlist the boys had curated. The vows were short, honest, written on index cards that trembled in their hands. I promise to show up, Graham said, his voice thick. Every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I promise to let you, Naomi replied. And to keep showing up too. When Graham kissed his bride, Miles Wolf whistled, so loudly the neighbors 3 houses down opened their windows to see what was happening. That evening, after cake had been devoured and guests had drifted home, the 4 of them stood in the living room holding a framed photo from the ceremony. Naomi in her white dress laughing. Graham with his hand on her waist, eyes crinkled with joy. Miles and Mason between them, matching suspenders, matching grins, matching relief that this was finally, permanently real. Where should it go? Graham asked. Miles pointed to the empty wall above the couch. Right there. Front and center. Mason nodded. So everyone sees it when they walk in. Graham hammered the nail, while Naomi held the level. The boys directed from below, bickering about angles and straightness and whether the frame was crooked or the wall was. When it finally hung, perfectly centered, perfectly them, they all stepped back. Miles spoke first, his voice quiet but certain. We weren't invited to the first wedding. Mason finished the thought. But we showed up anyway. Naomi pulled them close. Graham wrapped his arms around all three, his chin resting on top of her head. In the photo, they were laughing. In real life, they were home. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear that love is worth fighting for. Drop a like if you believe second chances are real, and comment below telling us what showing up looks like in your life. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is arrive anyway, uninvited, unashamed, and unwilling to be erased. Thank you for being part of this journey with us at Mr. William Chronicles.